What is the scariest, creepiest thing that has happened to you when you were home alone? Lived in a condo. In the middle of the night, I woke up to hear someone rattling my front door knob. No one had keys to my condo except me. Then, the door opened up and I heard someone walking in. I was 100% sure I was being robbed. Fight or flight kicked in and I flew out of bed and ran toward the front door screaming, "Get out of here!" Which came out as complete gibberish as I had been sound asleep about 30 seconds prior and now had crazy adrenaline pumping through my veins. I was literally jumping around in my underwear screaming and waving my arms when it dawned on me that the two guys standing at my front door looked more scared than I have ever seen anyone. One of the guys held out some keys, his hands were visibly shaking, and said something to the effect of his friend had given him the keys to his place and said he could stay there while he was out of town. Turns out the friend lived directly above me and these guys went to the wrong floor. The floors were not numbered and neither were the condo units, by mistake. They didn't know they were at the wrong door and that the keys were the same. I was able to get into his unit with my keys and they could open up my door with their keys. Needless to say, I was standing outside the hardware store the next day waiting for them to open so I could buy a new lock for my door. Can't wait to find their scariest encounter story. I was home alone with my toddler, getting ready for bed after putting her down for the night when I heard her call for me. So I went to her room and she was fast asleep. Weird. Maybe she had woken up for a moment and then passed out again. Got to that end of the hall before I heard her call for me in a panic. Rushed back in and she was still asleep in the same position. Sat with her for a few minutes and then made my way to bed when I heard my husband call my name. Must have come home from work early? So I go to him but he's not there. Call him and confirm he's still at work and decide I must have heard a neighbor or something. Crawl into bed and hear my husband call for me again and then continue talking as if he's having a conversation with someone. Then hear my child calling me again and rush into her room. Still asleep. This goes on for a while until I decide I must really need some sleep and go back to bed with the lights on. Too freaked out to sleep, I was staring at a picture hanging on the wall when it disappeared. Like the wall just ate it? Look at another wall hanging and the same thing happens. They would reappear when I looked away and then be eaten by the wall again when I looked directly at them. Decide I'm officially an insane person and call husband to come home. Fall asleep eventually and wake up and everything is normal except my heart rate can't decide on a pace, swinging up and down between 30s 180s. Head into the hospital and I'm having a hypertensive crisis. Turns out it was the beta blockers I'd started recently. Nobody had heard of that reaction so they kept me for a couple days until my numbers stabilized. No hallucinations after the first night other than hearing dogs bark randomly for a couple days. Not good times. 7-year-old me was playing with a doll I had got for my birthday, in the doorway of my apartment on the 3rd floor of a 3-story building. My dad was outside in the parking lot working on his car as he often did and me playing in the hall was pretty common as I had a friend who lived directly across from me who I was waiting to come home and play with. It was the 80s so being unsupervised was more acceptable. Suddenly this man I've never seen before walked up the stairs and approached me asking where my parents were. I told him my dad's outside in the parking lot and my mom's at work. I assumed he was a friend of my sister who was in her 20s as he looked the same age. He said he couldn't just leave me alone and picked me up and threw me over his shoulder. I figured he was just overreacting and going to take me to my dad but he made his way to the opposite door from the parking lot towards a side street where his car was. Just then my dad turned the corner, as he just happened to have gone over to the other side to secretly smoke a joint, and asked the guy what was going on. The guy put me down and said something about thinking I needed help and took off. My dad being stoned, didn't really react beyond WTF. Okay. Kidnapping attempt foiled. My sister didn't know him and she was living with a BF in another city. There was this one time when I was a kid, I watched the movie I Am Legend with my brothers and near the end there's a scene with a dog that makes you not want to pet dogs, let's just say. So we got home and there was a puddle of pee on the floor, but the house was locked and no one was home or had been home. We thought there was a zombie dog somewhere in the house just peeing on our stuff. But we could never find any reasonable explanation. Turns out years later that the neighbor kid would pee in upturned frisbees and freeze them and slide them under people's front doors for them to melt. That kid must have ate a ton of asparagus. That is a sick kind of genius. A few years ago, I, 24F, Got home from work around 10 p.m. while I was living with my parents, and they happened to be away on vacation that week. After cooking myself a late dinner, I went on to the back deck adjacent to the kitchen to grab something I had left out there earlier in the day. A bizarre sound caught my attention, like a dog panting. So of course I searched to see where it was coming from. I looked up to see my neighbor, 40 SM, across the street, standing on his deck buck naked and jerking off. He had been watching me through the window and did not stop when I discovered him. Rented a cheap bi-level duplex in a bad neighborhood for 3.5 years so that I could save up money to buy a house. First thing I did after unpacking from moving in was bolster security. I changed the deadbolt on the front door and installed a locking door knob in place of the crusty non-locking one that was there. All the windows were old, aluminum slider-style windows with horrible locks, and the back door was a patio door going straight onto a deck, so I bought a hardwood 1x4 and 2x4, and cut pieces to put in the window and door tracks so that any potential intruder would have to break a window rather than simply opening one to gain entry. I'm convinced that a past tenant was a drug dealer. In the first 6 months I had 4 separate instances of tweakers knocking on the door looking for Sam. A couple of the tweakers forlornly stepped off when I told them that nobody named Sam lived there. 2 others got worked up, asked where Sam had gone and where he was living, to which I responded that I had rented the place and had no idea who Sam is. After being visited by the tweakers, I redoubled my efforts to ensure that all doors were locked at all times. I still forgot to lock the front door once in a while, and I had a very creepy experience one night after forgetting to lock it. I was in the middle of cooking dinner one dark evening, and went to the washroom. After washing my hands and exiting the washroom, I came back to my kitchen to see a middle-aged Asian man dressed all in black coming up the stairs from the entrance into my kitchen. "Who the hell are you?" I asked, startling him. He said he was there to fix a toilet. I was sure I was going to die, but figured I ought to talk to the guy for a few seconds before lunging for a kitchen knife and fighting for my life. The guy explained that the landlord, Gary, had sent him to fix a toilet. I told him that Gary wasn't my landlord and my toilet was working fine. He asked what address he was at. I gave him my address, and he started profusely apologizing, saying he had the wrong address. He backed down the stairs cautiously, put his boots on, and sheepishly left the duplex. I'm still not sure if he was looking for Sam to square up some unpaid drug debts and left when he realized that Sam wasn't there, if he was looking for a woman to prey on, found me instead, and reconsidered his insidious plan, or if he really was just some poor sap who walked into a stranger's house while on a mission to fix a toilet for Gary, but I never mistakenly left the door at that place unlocked again. House sitting, babysitting for a new neighbor. She was a single mom from the East Coast, moved to Indianapolis. I was a 6th grader. All I had to do was sit in the house and do my math homework while she was on a date. Her 2-year-old baby was sleeping in his crib, room. Around 9 p.m. I get a call and answer. It's some man who only asks, "Who are you?" I say I'm the babysitter. Then he starts asking all these questions about where the mom is and who I am personally. I get scared and hang up and call the mom and let her know. The guy calls back and then just starts saying the address I'm at. Then asks if the baby is okay. When I say yes, he says, "How can you be so sure when he's that close to a window?" To which I just go, "I'm just the babysitter and in trying really hard on my math homework, and now I'm scared and I'm also failing math." Basically a mental breakdown happened. 5 minutes later the mom shows up and explains it's her ex-husband who found her. She hands me a wad of cash and excuses me. I don't know if the guy was in the bushes or calling from Massachusetts or what. It was scary. It was raining pretty hard one night and I was about to go to bed. Our dog decided to start going nuts, barking at the corner of the family room. We had just moved in, so there wasn't anything in there, but she just kept constantly barking at nothing. I tried to pull her away, but she wasn't having any of it. She started showing her teeth and snarling, which she never does. I figured there must be an animal outside, so I turned on the deck lights, deck is off the family room, and peer outside. Nope, nothing. I wasn't about to go outside because of the rain and I didn't see anything anyway. So I dragged the dog to the bedroom, but she just won't shut up. Finally decide to get my shoes and umbrella on and walk around the house. Found one of my neighbors curled up along the side of the deck trying to protect himself from the rain. He's disabled and a little slow. He usually goes out for walks in the neighborhood. He got caught in the rain and couldn't find his house. If my dog hadn't gone nuts, he might have been out there all night and who knows what could have happened. Totally not the ending I expected, so happy you decided to go out and check on the situation. I had just moved into my first apartment. It was around 8:30 p.m. and I heard the doorknob moving like someone was putting a key in it and turning and knocking. At first I got really excited that my then boyfriend was home, but then realized it was only 8:30 p.m. and he was due home from work around 10:30 p.m. So I looked out the kitchen window and didn't see his car or anyone's car I had no parked outside. That's when I panicked. The doorknob kept moving for a few more seconds and then stopped. A few minutes later they had some piece of metal they were sticking between the door trying to open the door. I freaked out at that point and locked myself in the bathroom with a knife and called 911. They tried to pry the door open for about 3 minutes before they stopped. The police surveillanced the area and found an elderly man roaming around with a knife and a crowbar. He used to live in that apartment and he wanted his stuff back that we stole when we moved in. I was told he was really delusional. I'm so thankful and glad I didn't answer the door once I realized it was no one I knew. To this day my heart stops when someone knocks on my door. Not super terrifying, but I was watching TV on the couch with the dog around noon or so. Suddenly she perks up, the hair on her back stands on end, and she begins snarling at the corner of the room. This dog, who was a previous abuse victim and scared of her own shadow, hesitant to ever bark or attack, was in a position to lunge. Right at that moment I hear clear, defined footsteps walk from my roommate's room across the hall, right in my line of vision. No one is there, but I'm looking directly at the source of the sound. The dog is on the defensive, but her tail is tucked between her legs at the same time. Immediately following this the room got really cold for a few seconds and it took her a while to lay back down. Never had any other paranormal experiences in that house, nor really ever in my life, the exception being a house I nannied in for a while. The suddenness of it really freaked me out. I was cleaning the garage at about noon. The door was up and the door into the house open and back patio doors open. I did not notice the bank alarm ringing around the corner. It was always ringing from false alarms, kids using the fire exit. Anyways, 2 men come running up my driveway into the garage into my house out the back doors, followed by a dozen armed police, and a Benny Hill type chase started through my house. I had to duck and cover under a workbench until they found the bank robbers under a kiddie pool and in a playhouse in the backyard. Do you mean kiddie pool? Or do you actually have a pool for kiddies? 'Cause I imagined that and it was great. Not at home, but at the barn alone. I'm standing there grooming my horse and out of nowhere I feel all the hairs on the back of my neck stand up and my fight or flight response kicks in. I turn around and there's a guy I don't know standing in the doorway looking at me with a creepy smirk on his face. He introduces himself as the boyfriend of a woman who keeps her horse at the farm and starts chatting and walking toward me. My normally very chill horse starts dancing around nervously and moves to position himself between me and the man before the man can get to me. I noped out of there and literally got on my horse and galloped off into the woods. 100% believe that man had ill intentions. I wasn't at home. I was working the night shift at a nursing home. I'm an RN, now disabled. It was just me and a CNA and we were the only staff in the Alzheimer's unit. She had the TV on some stupid show about hauntings in America. She looks at me and says, "You'd think nursing homes would be haunted a lot, because so many people die here." I just gave her a look and told her to shut up. This place is creepy enough at night. We go to do rounds on a resident who was in the process of passing. She was on hospice and her family was aware. I checked on her every 15 minutes because I didn't want her to be in pain and to see if she was in distress. At this time, she wasn't in distress, but it was obvious she wasn't going to last much longer. Her family lived across the country and had requested not to be called past 9 p.m. So, I stayed with her and held her hand and read to her from the Bible as she was a devout Catholic. After all of the aftercare was finished, the CNA and I had been in the room for 15 minutes. I left to call the funeral home and all of that. I'd barely dialed the phone number when the CNA came running down the hallway and said, "She's breathing again." I don't know what to do. She was obviously freaked and her face was pale. I went to the resident's room and she was definitely breathing. I checked vital signs and though everything was much lower than normal levels, they were there. I'd checked them several times after she'd passed and there had been no blood pressure, no pulse, no anything. She lived for another 5 years and claimed she'd met God.